Greetings from Castle Goring, from Nikki, Aurora, and from me. Well, as you know, an awful lot of interesting stuff has been happening. I've already tweeted about the King in the hospital, which I did yesterday, very early in the morning. So I don't think I need to refresh that. Because really it's perfectly standard when somebody has cancer that this sort of thing happens. And it might well happen again and again and again. So no need to panic. But we will now address the rather more important issue, or topically important issue at the moment, starting with what Faye Hart has to say. Dear Lady C, I presume that on Saturday you will be covering the scandal of Sentabale and Harry and Meghan, hoping this will be triggering also Invictus and African Parks, etc., and their connections with charity. Faye Hart, yes, I had done my Jean-Paul Guerlain episode, and I was determined to bring it out on Thursday for reasons which I really cannot get into legally. But it was imperative that it go out on Thursday, and that it go out in the manner in which it went out, which was me asking questions. And since I wasn't getting answers, it didn't prevent me from asking the questions. Let's put it that way. There are times when somebody with a torch needs to shine a light into a dark corner that may be rat infested. Let's put it that way. So Faye Hart says what she said, and I am now going to answer it to the best of my ability, and I'm going to cover this subject, hopefully, quite comprehensively. So here goes. Well, it is possible, but not likely, that this will have a domino effect upon Harry's other charities, which really they're only two, Invictus and African Parks. African Parks has already been problematic because of all the accusations made against the supporters of the employees would be a better word, of the charities, who have been encroaching upon and violating the rights of the locals. And of course, he simply just resigned, but only from being the chairman. He didn't resign from the charity itself. And he sort of made it someone else's problem. Invictus, as we know, has had problems for a while, but there are very mixed reports behind the scenes as to whether Harry will be replaced. But depending on what happens in terms of Dr. Sophie Chandauka's lawsuit against the trustees of Sentebale, it might be judicious for him to stand down from Invictus as well. It's a bit early to say what is likely to happen, but these things sometimes have knock-on effects. For instance, Prince Andrew. I leave it at that, because we have so much ground to cover on really rather more interesting aspects than the possibilities when we can be dealing with the certainties. Sharon Mack says, Sentebale, well done. Oh, and there's a Union Jack flag. Dr. Sophie, for standing up to Harry and also for having the UK Charity Commission investigate the Sentabale finances. Also, Harry, what about the baby girl that you promised to always look after? If I remember correctly, Sentebale means forget me not. Yes, and it was set up by Prince Harry and Prince Siso of Lesotho in memory of their late mothers, so that they would never be forgotten. We need to wait to see what is going to be revealed in terms of the Charity Commission's investigation into the Sentabale finances. One thing that is worth pointing out is that Meghan has never been to Lesotho, has never displayed any interest in going to Lesotho, and the word on the, I won't say on the street, in the corridors was that Meghan would never go and would keep Harry from going because Lesotho is poor and landlocked. And let's remember, Lesotho is so poor that it was the beneficiary of US aid. So, and that Trump himself brought up, mentioning Lesotho as a country that he singled out for mention in terms of what the misapplication of US aid into Lesotho. Now, I want to make the point, because this is a very important point to make. People who don't like Harry and Meghan need to bear in mind that until the charity commissioners have investigated the matter, it is possible that Meghan and Harry have been out-Meghaned by a bigger Meghan. In other words, because my information from my connections to and in Zimbabwe are that there is more to this than meets the eye, and that it is motivated because Dr. Sophie Chandauka is Zimbabwean. She's Zimbabwean born and bred, and she's very well educated. And I have two very reliable Zimbabwe connections. One who is Zimbabwean, and the other who is a close friend of a close relation of mine, and has explained to us over the years as to what really goes on in Zimbabwe. And this person is a member of the Mugabe family. And Grace Mugabe evidently still effectively runs Zimbabwe. Dr. Robert Mugabe died, and his widow, Grace, it was deemed unsuitable for her to run for office, but she evidently is what people were accusing Obama of being with Biden. She is the effective president behind the scenes. Now, this is very important because the Mugabe regime has always been extremely left-wing. They're communists. Robert Mugabe was a communist. But like many communists, and he was a very well-educated communist. He was educated by the Jesuits, and he was extremely intelligent. And he was obsessed with money. He died worth billions, and Grace herself is worth billions. And not only as having been his heiress. So they are also rabidly anti-white. Rabidly. They have real hatred for white people. Not all white people. They make exceptions. For instance, Chelsea Davies' father got along very well with Robert Mugabe and was partners with one of his leading henchmen. So if they liked you and if you were protected, you flourished. Otherwise, you either ended up with your property seized or you ended up in a coffin. And this is not an exaggeration. And there was tremendous anti-white feeling, and in certain circles in Zimbabwe, amongst certain people, especially the well-educated blacks, there is still a rabid hatred in certain quarters against white people. All of this needs to be borne in mind, because until the investigation is complete, we do not know whether the complaints are spurious or well-founded. And I have lived long enough to know not to always leap to conclusions. And I would caution anybody from leaping to the conclusion that one person is wonderful and the other person is terrible just because the other person is terrible. That person who you think might be so wonderful might not be so wonderful, and might even be more terrible than the terrible person. I just make that point for what it's worth. It is really important that we keep an open mind where this is concerned. Sparkplug says, Richard Eden said Audi pulled out of Sentebale as a sponsor because Meghan was demanding more and more money from them and every other sponsor they use. And then Sparkplug says something that I'm not going to repeat because it's highly defamatory. And Sparkplug, that may be your idea, that may be your interpretation. You may even be right, but I'm not prepared to repeat it because it is truly defamatory. However, there has for some time now been concerns behind the scenes about how the money was being spent and how support for the charity was almost becoming a form of simony, except that it was royalty being substituted for the spiritual. Simony is when you effectively buy your way into heaven. And that there was, now to an extent, charities do work on the basis that the closer you are to a royal is the more the charity is worth in terms of donations. But that's different from greed and gouging out everybody's eyes because certain people think they are so great and grand and important that they deserve more than anybody thinks the traffic can bear. Let's put it that way. And I want to get down to the real nitty-gritty now, because Precious H says, Lady C, And this really gets to the nitty-gritty and will hopefully cover the subject pretty comprehensively. I've been watching you on Dan Wootton Outspoken discussing the issues that provoked Dr. Sophie Chandauka to move against Harry. I don't know if you've read the comments on his channel. No, sorry, but I'm too busy, but it would be nice to be able to. But several Africans said how on target you were about the race issues. I'm African myself, so know they're right. Can you please discuss this on your channel? Also, the Zimbabwe connection, finances, and anything else you feel is relevant. I don't mean to sound condescending, but it's rare to get... Sorry. Let me recompose myself. It's rare to get an intelligent white aristocrat in England who gets black culture the way you do. I agree it's because of your Jamaican heritage, having been raised by black nannies, etc. I'd mentioned that on Dan. That's where that comes from. Can you used to maybe explain to... Oh, I think there's an extra word here. Can you... skip out. Can you maybe explain for your viewers who aren't black what's really gone on and maybe even what you think the outcome will be? Well, I can't predict the outcome because until either the Charity Commission exonerates the trustees of the charity or they condemn them, and until that happens, I'm afraid I can't really determine the outcome. What I will say is that the resignation of all of the trustees has been done with a view of making the Sophie Chandauka's lawsuit and complaint redundant because she's suing the trustees. And now that the trustees no longer exist as the valuable entity that she was suing, maybe to that extent the lawsuit will disappear. It was triggered superficially and immediately by the transfer of the management of the funds from London to South Africa. Oh, I think Lesotho actually. But anyway, to Africa, the Southern Africa. And of course, once the funds and the operation financially is transferred there, the trustees in Britain would no longer have any control whatsoever over how the money was spent and where it would go to. Now, Sophie Chandauka has been at great pains, and I'm going to read out her statement a little later because it's important that you hear it. But she has been at great pains to accuse the charity of incompetence and financial malfeasance as a reason for effectively seizing control of the money. Well, as my Zimbabwean friend said to me, and I'm West Indian, I know how these things work. As she said to me, she said, you know, we all know what goes on in many of these countries, and the corruption is unbelievable. And I'm not accusing anybody of corruption, and I'm not saying everybody's corrupt, but there is a general acceptance of corruption that is far greater then and it's tolerated far more cavalierly than it would be in, say, the United Kingdom. There is less accountability, and so there is a financial motive for moving it to South Africa and Lesotho, which we need to be careful what we say, and we need to observe what happens next, because Sophie Chandauka is totally at odds in terms of accusations, and the charity trustees are, I understand, very fearful of that aspect of things. And that aspect of things, to be particular, is that they would have absolutely no control over the money, and it would be controlled totally in Lesotho and or South Africa. So let's be clear about that. Another aspect of this is that Sophie Chandauka has been, as they have actually said, the trustees have made the point, she's been extremely vitriolic. Now, I am advised by not only my Zimbabwean friend, and I have to stop Aurora. No, it's Mickey. She's scratching on a cushion. That the degree of hostility could be motivated personally. It could be rage that the trustees balked at her seizing the money, or it could be, and evidently the word I'm hearing is that none of this would have happened even if she transferred the money to South Africa and Lesotho. None of this would have happened had Meghan not humiliated her in front of the whole world at the Wellington polo tournament, where she was supposed to be presenting the trophy, and Meghan regulated her, no, not her, there, and treated her as if she were a servant. Now, this kicks in with class and with colour, and I can speak as a Jamaican about both, because there are many parallels between the West Indian situation and the African situation. There are many differences as well, which I will also address. But Black Africans look down on mixed race people. They actually look down on West Indians and Black Americans generally. First of all, they never understand why Black people in America call themselves African Americans when they've never been to Africa. That's one of their constant complaints. So that should give you a clue as to how they feel. They also regard mixed race people as inferior to them. They look down on mixed race people. And they look down on those who were shipped across the seas and became slaves. So there's that going on. There's also the fact that Dr. Chandauka, I am assured, has to have links to the Mugabe regime and the Mugabe camp. Nobody who is as well educated as she is can, and her age, can possibly have been given the leg up she was given unless she was a bright black child who had a connection to the Mugabe regime. So if she is a faithful disciple of a black baiting, race hating, thieving regime such as Robert Mugabe's, and remember, they have annihilated in the most brutal way many of the white Zimbabwean citizens, and also just seized their property. So if this is her background, she would be extremely sensitive to any brown or white person who was going to be uppity with her. And Meghan is a brown person who passed for white for most of her life. Now, I know from what I was told about the comments of people of colour at Terra Nova, mostly women actually, in fact all women. I didn't hear of any male comments, female comments about Meghan, and they didn't vote. And some of the comments were made so that Meghan could overhear them. The disdain that black women have for brown women who have passed for white, and the outrage that they feel is quite pronounced. And so to then have this white passing, sometimes colour card playing brown woman humiliating her and treating her as if she was not a member of staff but a servant in front of the whole world, will have triggered tremendous rage and outrage. And my Zimbabwean friend says, and I have had so many comments from people who are African about this, confirming to me that what I said on Dan Wooten and what I said yesterday on this subject is correct, because I said that I have been told by my Zimbabwean friend that generally, obviously not 100%, but generally black women are very proud, they are very dignified, they never forget a slight, and that the way Sophie Chandauka would have coped with this was to ignore it, be gracious, act as if nothing had happened, go back and set about finding a way of venging herself against Meghan, which is precisely what she has done. So Harry and the charity could well be collateral damage. That Meghan finally was one little bit too uppity and haughty with one person too many, and she did it with someone who was in a position to massively hit back, which Sophie Chandauka has done, because her statement, which I need to read out, is so personal and so focused and so directed that there is little doubt that it is personal. And just let me see if I'm covering everything that I need to. Because I'm going to say, Sophie Chandauka was named the chairman of the board of Sentebale. and her appointment was greeted as a breath of fresh air. Harry was full of enthusiasm, and he said, and I'm going to quote, that her experience, passion for social change, and entrepreneurial spirit would be a tremendous benefit to Sentabale's next chapter. Well, she came with a very good provenance. She was made MBE by the late Queen, upon the recommendation, it has to be said, of a board. So it wasn't something that the Queen said, oh yeah, I just think Sophie Chandauka was fabulous, let's make her MBE. That's not how that worked. But she was ranked as one of the power list of the 100 most influential Black Britons. And her MBE was given for her extraordinary contribution to diversity in business. She actually, and this is why I'm careful to not lead to any conclusions. In a 2022 interview, she said that people in the City of London did not see racism because they had never experienced it. She said, I think people don't see what they've never felt. She was on Sentabale's board, however, for 6 years, from 2009 to 2015. So she didn't drop out of heaven like manna. She knew what was going on at Sentabale and had known for some time. She assumed the chairmanship of the board with eyes wide open, and they felt they could trust her. When she was explaining why she took on the role, she said that her success was specifically because many people took a chance on me, the young girl from Zimbabwe, and gave me air cover when the odds were stacked against me. She doesn't mention that she would have had to have been somebody from the Mugabe camp. I'm mentioning it. But that doesn't negate her accomplishments. She's evidently very bright, and it is important that we do not jump to conclusions one way or the other. She said that Sentebale, and I'm going to quote, has the capacity to transform lives and inspire youngsters to reach for the stars and define their own destinies. And I'm going to read out her statement because this is really important. And we'll just wrap it up afterwards because you need to hear what she said. I chose to join Sentabale, and she was a very successful businesswoman, entrepreneur. She's evidently sharper than two pins, and she's what Meghan would like to have been, successful and bright and wily. So that doesn't mean what she's saying and doing isn't correct, but it is important that we understand. So I'm going to read out her statement. I chose to join Sentabale first and foremost as a proud African who understands that in the spirit of Ubuntu, which has no English translation, incidentally. So, to whom much is given, much is expected. Everything I do at Sentebale is in pursuit of the integrity of the organization, its mission, and the young people we serve. My actions are guided by the principles of fairness and equitable treatment for all, regardless of social status or financial means. There are people in this world who behave as though they are above the law and mistreat people, and then play the victim card. I wonder who she could be speaking about. Mickey, Aurora. What is that? Harry and Meghan? Oh, thanks for that. I'll continue. See, the girls are more clever than I am. There are people in the world who behave as though they are above the law and mistreat people, and then play the victim card and use the very press they disdain to harm people who have the courage to challenge their conduct. This is a direct shot at Harry and Meghan. But let me interject before I continue reading her statement and point out it's also a shot of a black Marxist against a black prince, which is what Prince Siso of Lesotho is. So don't think that political leanings and class don't come into this, because they very well could. A lot of people in the West think all black people love all black people. Not true. There's tremendous class and colour prejudice as well amongst black people. So I just say that as a Jamaican, because the one thing all Jamaicans are, whether they are white, brown, black, yellow, pink or green, is they are schooled from birth in a multicultural, multiracial society with all the nuances. And we observe from we are babies, both the pro and cons of racial dealings, harmony and prejudice. And do not for a second think that a black socialist, especially a successful one, wouldn't also be lying in wait to bring down a black prince. Because if you think that's not possible, now I know any black person listening to this will know what I'm saying is sensible, but I think our community is sufficiently sensible to know that that will be true. But of course, there are many people, mostly white bleeding hearts, who think, oh no, never. Well, take it from me, all the time. So, I'm going to repeat it, there are people in this world who behave as though they are above the law and mistreat people, and then play the victim card and use the very press they disdain to harm people who have the courage to challenge their conduct. That's absolutely true, and that's absolutely applicable to Harry and Meghan. And my understanding is that's exactly who it was aimed at. And of course, she will know that Meghan throws her weight around, and she will be as horrified about it as those women of colour in Jamaica at Terra Nova who were busy being rude about Meghan loudly enough for her to hear were appalled by it as well. I just make that point for what it's worth. Discerning readers will ask themselves, why should the chair of the board report her own trustees to the Charity Commission? Why would the High Court of England and Wales accept her application to hear the matter at all if the case had no merit? Well, because and I'm going to pick up on that a little bit later, because she's doing a very Meghaned and Heroldian thing here, and I don't think we want to get away with it. Not that what she says might not have merit, but we need to pick until we know who's actually in the right. We need to be very, very studious about accepting anything on face value. Well, because beneath all the victim narrative and fiction that has been syndicated to press is the story of a woman who dared to blow the whistle about issues of poor governance, weak executive management, abuse of power, bullying, harassment, misogyny, and misogynoir. That is colour prejudice against black people. Oh, Meghan, I can't believe that this is happening to you. Well, I was never, ever accused of being black until I came to England and the press accused me of being black. Me, look at me. My skin is white. Well, it's certainly whiter than her sister Samantha's. And then she says, and the cover-up that ensued. I could be anyone. I just happen to be an educated woman who understands that the law will guide and protect me. I will say nothing further on this matter at this time. I have one job. I must focus on fundraising for the very important work of the young people who inspire the incredible team at Sentabale, who make sacrifices daily at a time when geopolitics is severely impacting funding for development work in Africa. For me, this is not a vanity project from which I can resign when I am called to account. I am an African who has had the privilege of a world-class education and career. I will not be intimidated. I must stand for something. I stand for those other women who do not have the ways and means. I am indebted to those who have stood by me and picked up my urgent call for help so that we can continue the mission at Sentebale. I will continue to faithfully perform my role as chair of the board, and I look forward to the opportunity to work with others who are interested in issues of health, wealth, and climate resilience for young people in Africa. Well, that's a fantastic and a very noble sounding and very shrewdly and cleverly drafted and even possibly truthful statement. She certainly knows how to hit below the belt where Harry and Meghan are concerned, and she's done it. Every word she says could be true and fair, and I think, especially considering Harry and Meghan's track record, that we should give her every chance to prove that everything she has said is so. However, I will make the point when she says that why would the chair of the board report her own trustees to the Charity Commission? Why would the High Court of England and Wales accept her application to hear the matter at all if the case had no merit? That's an overplay of the hand. Anybody who knows about the law knows that as long as there is an arguable case, even if it's clearly not winnable, it has to be accepted. So, and if she has enough that she can insert into her claim that is arguable, irrespective of its merit, the court has to abide by it, especially when it involves two princes. So she could, of course, be, in fairness to her, trying to bat away any riposte from grand English and Lesotho circles. And let's give her the benefit of the doubt and say that's why she has included that, because she has understood that she is either going to prevail or she's going to be buried, but she's trying to bury Harry and Meghan. And most likely Prince Seeso as well as the rest of the board, which is very, very white and very, very eminent and very, very British. I make that point for what it's worth. So let us wait and see what happens. Because it's been amazing that I need to make a point that's important. For that charity to continue to flourish, now that this has happened, it will have to be supported by people with sufficient funds who will be able to keep it afloat in the way that it has been kept afloat as a result of Harry and Prince Seeso. I'm not saying it won't do better, because there will be many anti-white, Marxist, black supporters who should be vested if they have any sense whatsoever in achieving their political objectives of making the point that, which is a point that is a very topical in South Africa at the moment, that black people don't really need white people, and poor people don't really need rich people, because they can manage perfectly well without them. Of course, what that really means is they can manage without those that they don't care about, because those that will support them get a free pass, as indeed has happened in Zimbabwe, not only where black people are concerned, but where white people are concerned. I simply use Chelsea Davis' father as an example. So the charity is claiming one thing, she's claiming one thing, and the former trustees are claiming something else. And it will be interesting to see what happens. But there have been problems for a while, and there is every possibility that Dr. Sophie Chandauka has a point, because it has lost Linda Chalker, Baroness Chalker. She was there for years. She was a chum of Diana's. She was something in, I think it was the Thatcher government, if I remember correctly. I ran across her quite a few times. I think she was in the Thatcher government. I think she was Minister of Overseas Development or something like that. Then there was well, I mean, there have been so many people who it's bled, people who have jumped off the ship in the last few years. Linda Chalker was the first, and all of the others have left. I should actually say, I don't think all of the trustees are white, but most of them are. I think one or two are black, but most of them are white. And they have all resigned. And this is a way of trying to stop the lawsuit. Let us see what happens. So I hope I have explained myself sufficiently well that you get the picture. Let me see, actually. I'm just going to see if there is anything that I omitted to mention. I don't think so. I think I've covered the ground. I hope I have. And on that note, I'll say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please keep the questions and comments coming in so I will know what you would like us to be speaking about. Okay, thank you. Take good care. Godspeed and have a good weekend. Bye-bye. And if you have truly enjoyed this, would you care to like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell? Godspeed. Bye.